Welcome to The Difference. I'm Steve Castile, and today we have a very, very special guest and friend of the hour. John Anderson is here, and we can't wait for him to share a little bit about himself. So stay tuned. Welcome back. John, we are so glad you're here with us today. You and Anthony have become incredible friends, but today it's just you and I.
Mm.
And so, what we want to do is take a minute and let not only the people get to know you, but for you to share with us uh, the way that you have lived in creativity all your life. Your dad, Walter, is renowned, and Anthony's done an incredible documentary of him. But an intricate part of that story is the family and living with
Absolutely.
somebody who is this creative genius that not even the family kind of understands. So,
Um,
welcome and thank you for taking time to be with us.
well, thank you, Steve. I really have been looking forward to talking with you, and I appreciate your having me here.
Oh, listen, it's our honor. I want to start out of the block. There are a lot of people that know part of your dad's story. They probably don't know your story, and kind of anything you'd like to share about the family dynamics underneath this creative life that you were birthed into. So, uh, just take a minute and help our audience get to know you a little better.
Um, I am a little bit amazed myself about how fortunate I have been in life. Um, I've often wondered why God gave me so much. Um, as you know, I was raised at Shearwater Pottery, and it was an incredible opportunity. My grandmother graduated from Newcomb College in 1900
Wow.
with a degree in art. And she developed the philosophy that if every person surrounded themselves with beauty, the world would become a more beautiful place. And she was such a powerful woman. Um, I was amazed as a young boy at how much people on Shearwater respected her because to me she was kind of a tottering old lady in her 90s. But um, her three sons, my father and my uncle Peter the potter and my uncle Mac, were for me larger than life heroes. And here, these heroic people, and my Aunt Pat, my mother, and my Aunt Sarah, all of these people deferred to and respected my grandmother. And at one point, I asked them, probably asked my mother, why my grandmother deserves so much respect. And the only response I ever got was that she was a New Orleans lady. And for a long time, I thought that a New Orleans lady was some kind of um, a genetic.
You were born into it.
It was some kind of advanced evolutionary state or something. Um, but her three sons respected and admired her so much that they adopted her philosophy and spent their lives creating beautiful things for people to surround themselves with. Of course, the goal was still to make the world a more beautiful place. And growing up on Shearwater, um, as a young boy, it was kind of like living in Camelot.
Well, let's stop. When you say Shearwater, some of our listeners may not know
Mm.
what Shearwater is. Tell us a little bit about that place you grew
Well,
up.
my grandmother inherited some money at one point, and she uh, got on the train in New Orleans and went to at that time, to the end of the line, which was Ocean Springs. Uh, Found this piece of property um, that was almost surrounded by water, although it was near the center of a small coastal town. It was kind of set off, and she bought it immediately, and then went back to New Orleans and told her husband that she had bought it and that they were moving to Ocean Springs. She wanted to start an artistic retreat,
Mm.
and she did. She started an artistic retreat that initially she called Fairhaven, but then her eldest son, Peter, decided he wanted to have a pottery, so they turned it into a pottery. It's 25 acres, surrounded by water,
Mm.
but Peter, just through willpower, turned it into an art pottery that opened in 1928. And from that point on, people have been visiting it. I believe people are always um, seeking beauty.
Mm.
And through word of mouth, they find it. One way or another, they'll find it. And people across the state and Louisiana and Alabama, Georgia, all over the South, and further afield, would come to visit Shearwater Pottery. When I was growing up, the main road between Texas and Florida passed right through along the coast there. Um, and so people, when they were going from New Orleans to Florida, or from Florida to New Orleans or Texas, um, friends would say, "Oh, you have to stop in and see this place where a family has devoted their lives to creativity."
Mm.
And so I was living in the middle of that. Um, my Uncle Peter built me a canoe when I was about 8 years old, and built all the other children living there canoes. So we would chase each other around the little bayous and things, play hide and seek under the docks and in the Ocean Springs Harbor. Um, we had a tree house that 5 or 6 kids could sleep in at night if they wanted to. We had forts all over the woods. Um, Basically, looking back, I would not trade my childhood with anyone,
Well,
anywhere.
when you said being raised in Camelot, it's almost like you were in this world of your own.
Yeah, all of our parties, uh, family celebrations, were at the front house, and the front house had a great big round table, and we were getting visitors, as I say, from all over the country constantly. Um, People like Eudora Welty or William Faulkner or Walker Percy would stop in at Shearwater and visit. And so we were living in Camelot, but we were also getting visitors from all over the world who were, from our perspective, knights and their ladies on quest.
Well, and I mean, when you think about your grandmother's legacy, what better tribute than to have these creatives come there as a testimony to the
Hmm.
sacredness and the wonder of the place.
Yes. Yeah, it was an unusual thing. Um, no, I didn't, as a young person, I didn't appreciate it. Um,
Isn't that the way most of us
that's
are?
that's the way we are. Um, I think that I just wanted to be like everybody else, and um, the people at Shearwater were most of them were inherently somewhat different.
Yeah. You didn't have a
So
prayer.
I tried to be normal,
Yeah.
um, and I tried to avoid that, but eventually I was kind of pulled into it. Um, and to, quite honestly, as you mentioned, none of us appreciated what Daddy was doing. The people that lived at Shearwater were one step away from the norm. Daddy was like 3 steps away from the norm.
Well, I mean, at Shearwater, you had the pottery going on. It was like a conventional business built around creativity.
It was
And then your dad was out eh, just in another place, out
dimension.
to the islands and just disappearing and staying gone and coming back. You're right. It was a different level of
Yeah.
difference.
Um, I've learned uh, more recently that he was doing that intentionally. Um, at the time, we all believed that it was kind of an accident, but I think that he understood that to see anything new in life, we have to look from a different place.
Yeah.
If we're looking from the same place that everybody else is looking from, we're going to see the same thing that everybody else is seeing. And Daddy, like most artists, was trying to see life creatively, to see not just what is normal and probable, but what is possible. And to see what's possible, he had to step outside of the norm. Um, it's kind of bizarre because we couldn't really see who he was until we looked back. Um, and we actually discovered him through his art, as so many people did. Um, his family had to discover him through his art.
Well, and I think, one of the blessings we've had with Anthony doing the documentaries and the table books, the Bicycle Chronicles and so forth, I in no way understood how complex his story was and also how intentional he was about kind of insulating you guys from
Mhm.
what he perceived as other people's perception of him.
Yeah. Um, it's it's bizarre because partially through Anthony Thackston's research, I've discovered many things about him that I wouldn't have discovered otherwise. Um, he understood that what we see is very much dependent upon our perspective,
Yeah.
where we look from. And You know that because you're a minister, and perspective is kind of your bread and butter.
We hope it is.
Anthony understands it because he's an artist. But a lot of people don't understand that through the power of perspective, we can go to the bottom of the ocean,
Yeah.
leap to the top of the highest mountain, just through this magical power that every human being has, and mostly is not using.
No, we talk all the time on the show about the creative imagination of God, and part of our being created in His image is that ability to imagine and, as you said, look creatively with a perspective that other people can't see. And as I think about your story of your grandmother and your story of your dad, it's creativity from really, when you talk about perspective, your grandmother anchored down in a place and created a haven for creatives to be, and your dad went out into the world and looked at things and sent us pictures back, illustrations of the world as we've never seen it.
Right. Well, God is the creator. So if you want to know God, you almost have to go through creativity.
Yeah.
To become more creative is to become more like God. And
Well, and you started off by saying one of the things, we're sitting here in uh, the Institute for Southern Storytelling, and one of the ways that we experience the creativity is learning the stories behind things that we only see a surface level of, and it's like another way of perspective. As Anthony did the book on the Bicycle Chronicles, who in the world would have ever believed a story of a young man who takes money for education and ends up on a freighter to China and loses everything and yet gains everything from the perspective he gains going? Nobody, if you don't know that backstory, you miss such a
mhm,
powerful perspective that helps you begin to understand the life of a man.
yes, Daddy started out as an adventurer. Each of those trips, each of those trips to Horn Island, each of those bicycle trips was a quest. He was he was in search of God. He was in search of the beauty of man. Um, in one of his journals, he wrote exactly what he was doing with his life in one sentence. In order to realize the beauty of man, we must realize our relation to nature.
Wow.
And then he spent 20 years wandering in the wilderness, camping on a wilderness island, in an attempt to realize his relation to nature and his relation to God as fully as possible. And from that relationship, he attained creative vision. He could see things that other people couldn't see. One way to describe what he did is to say that most people look at nature. He chose to place himself in a situation where he was looking from nature. And that is 180 degrees
It's
out of phase
exactly.
from the norm. Now, actually, for me, I'm kind of obsessive. And I, I feel like we've gotten a little out of order because you have to give people a reason to want to look at these things. And when I started searching for my father, I started with a very powerful reason. after his death and after the first exhibit of his work, it became very apparent that it helps to know something about art and artists. Every time an artist draws a drawing or paints a painting, they're creating a piece of physical evidence that documents a period in their life. During the time that they're drawing that drawing or painting that painting, that piece of physical evidence shows us what they were doing, often where they were and how they were feeling. So, although people think of art as kind of a nebulous thing, it actually isn't, because you have all of this physical evidence. And in my father's case, when you take all of the drawings and all of the paintings and all of the murals and all of the decorated pottery and all of the sculpture, when you take all of that physical evidence, it documents almost every minute of his life. We know from the physical evidence what he was doing and what he did. And what everyone who studied his work knows is that he was more creative than most people, because you have the physical evidence. We know that he was more productive than most people. We know from the community center murals, which was a gift that he gave to the community. He spent 2 years creating this enormous mural, which he gave to the community. We know that he was very generous, because he gave a mural that's now appraised at more than $36 million to his community. We know that he cared about people, or he wouldn't have given that gift. We know from all the decorated pottery that he was contributing to the family business throughout his whole life. We know from his portraits of the people in his life, they radiate love. We know that he loved people. And we know from my mother's account that he was a very social man, that he took care of people when they were sick, that he was a very caring, kind, gentle man. We know from his documented trips that he was very brave, that he would go off to China and walk across China toward Tibet. We know all of this. And I didn't learn all of that until after his first exhibit. Well, that gave me a reason to want to know who he was. I wanted to know, well, how do you become that creative, that productive, that generous, that loving? And so I wanted to discover who he was. I had incentive. Of course, I also had extra incentive because he was my father.
Right.
And I wanted to know who my father was. So the first thing I did was ask my mother. She was my authority. And I remember what she told me. She told me he was a shaman, and that he traveled out to the furthest limits of the cosmos and looked back.
What
And
an
then
incredible image.
and
I
then
love
tried to
that.
communicate that to other people through his art. When she told me that, I was young, and I got this blank look on my
Didn't
face,
understand the
and I had
gravity
no
of it.
idea what she was saying. Absolutely. And she knew immediately that I had no idea.
Mm.
You know, I hadn't read Carlos Castaneda or anything like that at that time. And so she looked down and maybe cried a tear or two, and then looked up and said, maybe you ought to go out to Horn Island.
Oh, wow.
And I forgot about that. But then 2 or 3 months later, I was pushing a little sailboat out of the marsh in front of Shearwater and sailing out by myself to spend 10 days on Horn Island. And that's where I began to discover who he was, because I spent 10 days out there, and after 10 days in solitude, it was pretty terrible because I chose to go in August. It was,
wow.
It was really...
So you and the
it was
sand
really
fleas and the mosquitoes
painful.
had great communion.
Third degree burns, no sunblock, cactus spines in my feet. It was a wilderness.
But it was total
experience.
immersion.
Total
in
immersion.
the world that he had.
And by the time it was over, I had looked at the mainland through his eyes.
And your perspective.
And my
changed.
perspective was 180. I was no longer looking from the mainland to the island.
Oh, wow.
I was looking from the island to the mainland. And that's 180 degrees. And I could see the world the way he saw it.
Oh, wow.
And that gave me much more incentive to find out
To
who
go
he
deeper.
was.
Well, John, I want us to stop. We're gonna have to do 2 episodes. This is so incredible, and what I want the listeners to know is that there's lots of information out there. There's an incredible documentary that Anthony did, and we'll give you a link to that. A couple of books that do that. We hadn't even talked about the museum and the pottery and everything there. So we hope you listeners will come back and join us for our next episode. And in that episode, John, I want us to kind of take a step away from your dad and begin to go on your journey. Because what I'm beginning to feel is with his artist perspective, he was the shaman, the creator. For me, now I feel like you've kind of gone Indiana Jones on us, and you become the archaeologist who is digging into that beautiful treasure trove and now beginning to help us discover stuff that we could never see as you discover it. So I look forward to our conversation next
Me too.
episode. And for those of you who are listening, tune in and listen. And as always, hey, remember, live loved.
You've been listening to The Difference, a presentation of The Hour. The Difference is made in conjunction with and partnership with the Institute for Southern Storytelling at Mississippi College. To find out more about the Institute and ways that we are partnering and mentoring young lives through storytelling, filmmaking, and more, visit us at southernstorytelling.mc.edu. And for more resources from The Hour and from The Difference, check us out at our Hour Stream platform with the streaming content at thehour.org. I'm Anthony Thaxton. Thanks for joining me.